If there was one picture that set me on the road to where I am now, it's this picture by Henri Cartier-Bresson, and it's taken in Greece. And it's in effect, it's a mirror image of two old ladies walking down the street with two caryatids above them. And I remember seeing this picture when I was 12, and it was the first time I ever really understood what a picture was all about and how a picture told a story. I don't want to be Henri Cartier-Bresson, there was only one. I just want to be Giles Penfound. But I want to tell, and I've always wanted to tell stories in my own particular way. I got that massive chance to be able to do that when I became an army photographer. And it's through these images and the selection of images that trace a path through what I hate to use this word journey because it's so overhyped, but this transition from me being an inexperienced photographer to being a experienced, seeing, knowing, thinking photographer, and a photographer who thinks about stories. If there is, and I'm certainly not a religious person, perhaps because of what I photographed, but if there was a true hell on earth, then it existed for a brief time in the children's hospital in Foinica, where the children were subject to the worst excesses of people's madness and insanity, where decency and humanity had been cast aside, irrespective of the fact that it was known what was here and what was happening to these children. How can you not become emotional? How can you not get fucking angry at the way people treat other people, particularly children? The innocence, you know. I saw a particular side of conflict. I would never say I was never a war photographer. I was perhaps more a photographer of conflict, usually set up by the people who I was working with. And this was emphasized very much by the Iraq War and the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And prior to that, I'd embedded myself with, to most people's thoughts, a pretty secondary unit that nobody was really interested in. So I was the only photographer there when Colonel Tim Collins, this extraordinary force of nature, this amazing man, ex-SAS officer, who was then the battle group commander, gave this just remarkable speech, this Henry V type speech to his men. And you know what, the truth of it doesn't actually matter. What he really said doesn't actually matter anymore. But the feeling of what he said was so important. You cannot, I believe, separate the instances where you make pictures. It's just not possible. Because you will make a story with certain ideas and intentions, and then years later, that story will interrupt on something else that you're doing in quite a shocking way. And one picture that really emphasizes this is from a long-term project I did called Day Trips to Hell, which was about the former death and concentration camps in Poland and Germany. And I made an image at the selection ramp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and it's a picture called 14 Gulls, because on each of the electrified fence posts there's a gull. I remember standing on the selection ramp at Auschwitz and thinking as a father and as a husband and as a soldier, how would I behave, and how would I have treated people in that same situation? And it was an academic argument, because obviously I would never be put in that position. And I completed the project, and it was for my degree that I was doing at the time, and I did very well out of it, and I moved on. But this picture would come back to haunt me, and this picture would come back to change the emphasis of the story that I was about to make. And it did it most profoundly. Bridge 4 in Iraq was the point where everything changed for me. In terms of what I felt I was there to do, and there was a massive conflict of interest came because of what happened at Bridge 4. This was just prior to the full invasion, or the full battle for Basra, and so civilians were fleeing Basra. and families were fleeing Basra, and we were sat on Bridge 4 in the main highway, stopping people coming out. And I was photographing, I should have been photographing good PR pictures of what the army were bravely doing. But instead, I just, after taking this particular picture and seeing this woman, this mother, being separated by this massive soldier from her men, whether it's her husband, I don't know, I never knew. But they were being forced apart. Families were being separated and forced apart. All I could think of was the selection ramp at Auschwitz. Now, I never compared the Welsh Guards, or rather the Irish Guards, to the SS or the perpetrators of the Holocaust. But I found myself in that position that I'd wondered how I would behave all those years before. Of how would I behave? What would I think had I seen this sort of thing happening? Documentary photography and war photography, particularly war photography, people get very excited about it and think it's great fun, it's very sexy, but it's not. It's not sexy because it's filled with putrid smells and horrible noises and desperate thoughts. And if you empathize with the people in front of you, you can just imagine how absolutely terrified they become when faced with an aggressive force. And then you realize you're part of that force. And nothing you'll ever do will placate that. And nothing you ever do will get the images out of your head of these people and what happened to these people. In terms of story making, and particularly photographic story making, I think one of the most maligned areas of photographic story production are weddings. And I shot weddings for a good sort of 3 years. And whilst at the end of it I'd had enough, I have to admit that I produced some of the most fantastic images of people and little stories of people at weddings. And this is the wedding image that's on my wall in my office, of two just fantastic people. They're just absolutely delightful. Actually, I photographed their cousin's wedding and they've become good friends of mine. But the point of the story is just being prepared and opening yourself up to stuff that happens and not being closed off, not being shut off from the possibilities of stories that happen. And it's just a picture of two people in their wedding gear and a cyclist riding past. But the contrast between the cyclist with his co-op bag and Scrumpy Jack is just fantastic, and I absolutely loved it. And I made 2 frames of it, and I can remember saying to him as he was coming down the road by the Bridge of Sighs up in Oxford, I said, "Do you mind if I take a picture, mate?" And I can't remember if he said yes, or I think he may have just nodded, because he's got these black shades on looking really cool. And I made this frame, and it's just the best wedding image I ever made. So, you know, making a story, a serious story at a wedding, it's not allowed, is it? And then we come to India, truly one of the most magical places on the planet, I think. And I took this fantastic railway journey, a journey that I've been wanting to take all my life, since watching the great railway journeys of the world on the BBC. And there I was, having this journey and making the images of this journey. And we got to Jodhpur, and the busyness and the frenetic nature of this place was just extraordinary. You know, my little story of India and Jodhpur was enhanced by doing that thing that they say you shouldn't do when you make documentary work, engaging. Or you shouldn't talk to people, you should just step away and record it. But how can you do that? How can you possibly record a story if you don't somehow become emotionally involved in it? And so the point of engaging with the people, whether it is just a smile or just making a funny face with the kids, of making a human connection with somebody else and making a picture of that. But it's also for me, one of the important things about making images like this is you make an image. You don't rattle off, and this is a digital image, you don't rattle off hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images and bore the absolute shit out of the subject who's being photographed. What you do is you make that connection, and at the absolute zenith, the right moment with something like this, you push that shutter when things are right. And if you've got it, you've got it. If you haven't, well, then it wasn't meant to be. You didn't do it right. What you don't do is spend, minutes and minutes and minutes trying to get these images, I believe. You engage in this dance, as it were, between the three of you, the subject, yourself, and the camera. And I think all too often we get far too serious about who the subject is. And we need to remember this when making pictures, that everything, absolutely everything, is going to be a good shot. And this picture of one of my dearest friends, Matt Timbers, who I served with for many a long year in many a crazy place, is an example of that for me. Because it's an image made right at the end of a very, very interesting day. Both of us, we went up to document and photograph the funeral of Maggie Thatcher in 2013. And we made a whole series of really, really good images and little small stories and little vignettes about people who have been to pay their respects or to protest. There's this whole world of stuff going on at this funeral. And we made some really nice images, and I met an old friend of mine who I'd served with in Northern Ireland and saw other people. And at the end of the day, we'd finished. We got on the tube, and Matt picked up the London Evening Standard, and he started arsing around on the tube, reading this paper. But to look at this picture, without me telling you that this is a great friend of mine, you wouldn't know that's a great friend of mine. It's just a good picture. It's just a really interesting picture of a man making a funny face with two Oriental ladies to his left, looking very, very serious. So the point of this last picture is that don't give up on any subject. Don't not take images. Don't think of family as something boring to photograph, or friends as well. They're not really important. It's vitally important, because within that single image there is a story. The story doesn't have to be an essay or a long document or a long project. It can be just that single image. That's it.